discussion about what those other sources might be, and might the Republicans been able to support them?
Well, we talked about, obviously, the Senate Republican plan that's out there. I told them some ideas that the House Republicans have come up with, and we believe that all of those combined are the most prudent way to push forward at substantive investment in transportation. To your point of other ideas, when the trucks only plan from the House Democrats, that, as you know, it certainly does not get anywhere near enough money. And so I think that they're still working on that, but that's part of the problem, that we don't actually believe the trucks only plan works. We don't believe in the toll avenue to begin with, because we feel there's other ways to do it that are more responsible, and we've put some of those on the table. But we don't believe that their trucks only plan at this point fiscally works.
If I can, let me just say, Mark, they don't have another income component. What they do is they take basically $183 million of the toll money. They have some borrowing out of the STF, and then they're using about $257 million of the rainy day fund. Now, the $257 million is what is above that 15%, remember, between 5 and 15%. So they're using that excess money to pay down on liabilities, much like the Senate plan, to pay down on liabilities, and that's how they get there. So they don't have any additional monies that are necessary for them to reach a $19 billion plan.
Were you able to convince the governor that your plan will make it more palatable to become to your side at all, do you think?
Well, I think we made a great pitch for it, that, look, and I think they agree with the concept because they're taking some of the concept for their plan. So I think they agree with the concept. They just want to have a truck toll. And we believe a truck toll is a non-starter, is not the right way to go, because the confidence that it is going to remain a truck toll is very low, because people don't trust government, because we make promises, the legislature's made promises and haven't kept them in the past. And whether it's this legislature or the next, it doesn't matter.
With the urgency at which you're moving here, do you see something happening before the end of the year, or is this something that'll be handled in next session?
I think that's an excellent question. The governor said, and you'll speak to him later so he can talk to you about what he thinks his time frame is for moving forward. We were very happy that we all sat in a room. We should have done this 8 months ago, 10 months ago, and had these conversations face to face. We talked about picking different parts of everybody's plan or everybody's ideas or everybody's alternatives and making a plan that actually works for everybody. But unfortunately, they seem very much myopic in their view of having tolls of some way, shape, or form, and in this particular conversation, it was still trucks.
What has the governor told you about the rainy day fund? In other words, he originally used the word risky. The 1.5 out of the 2.5 is very high. Has he told you that he would accept a lower amount, or has he told you we're not doing this no matter what? Well,
He still maintains the position that he doesn't like taking as much as the plan proposes. Their plan with the House Democrats have put out does take some money out of the rainy day fund. That money is above the 15% that would automatically come out, and they're taking it about a year early, if that kind of makes sense. So at 15%, whatever that number is, in 2021, it will be $257 million above that 50%. That's what they're taking out, paying down on unfunded liabilities, like we do in the transportation fund and the general fund, moving the fringe from the transportation fund to the general fund. So they're doing our plan as we suggest. They're just only doing it with $257 million.
And only above the 15%.
And, well, it won't be there, but they're taking it above that 15%. And the question we asked them, if it doesn't get to that 15%, would you still take it? And it seems like they said yes, but it wasn't an ironclad yes. And then we raised some questions from there.
And we also talked about some structural changes to the way the STF functions, because we believe this is not just we don't want tolls. We don't want tolls for several reasons. One, we believe there's a better way that's more fiscally responsible. We believe there's a way that will garner more trust from the citizens of the state of Connecticut, because it will not be taking more funds out of people's pockets. Because it seems that the way we operate in this legislature is that when money is needed, we go to a new revenue source. We never look within. I mean, we look back on the Fiscal Accountability Commission who recommended going out for a consultant. They asked for $1 billion of savings. Governor Malloy put out the RFP for half a billion dollars of savings, and we put that in statute. That should have been done by now. That's a lot of money, and that's money that could have been used for this type of thing, so this conversation did not even need to be had. We spend almost $500 million in fringe, but including wages, healthcare, and pension for DOT, DMV, and some deep employees out of the Special Transportation Fund. I'm sure we all hear the same question every day. What about all this money I'm paying that's supposed to go into the Special Transportation Fund? Where did that all go? Well, when you're taking $500 million out of it to pay for those 3 items with those employees, every other state employee is paid from the general fund. That needs to structurally change, or this conversation is going to continue going on. If tolls are somehow passed today, that is why tolls will continue increasing. That is why the amount paid in tolls will increase. Because the structure of this state and the structure of the Special Transportation Fund, as we've talked about year after year, is faulty. That needs to be fixed no matter how difficult it is.
And that was the premise for why we pay down the unfunded liabilities, to move the fringe out of the STF. We move about half the fringe on the Senate plan,
How
Republican
much
plan.
common ground was there? I mean, frankly, you were in there for quite a while, longer than many other meetings. Was the reason because there was common ground that we're not hearing so far and what you're saying, or why were you in there so long?
Well, there was a lot of questions about the plan that we had. For instance, if it's a truck plan, what are we tolling in terms of trucks? Are you tolling, Ford 150s? Are you tolling vans? They were suggesting we're tolling large trucks, heavy trucks, and medium trucks. Well, that's not defined in the statute, so what does that mean? Is it per axle? Is it weight? What's the highest? What's the lowest? And they answered all those questions, but that's all the questions we were trying to figure out what the impact was and to how they got to their number of 183 million. And some of their plan, from what we heard yesterday, changed from this morning, which I get why. You always are refining your plan. So there's some things that changed, which also changed their numbers.
But I think there is a lot of common ground to your original question. I think there is. I think that there was conversation about rainy day fund and different ranges of using it. I think there was conversations about finding savings. I think there was conversations about a lot of these things we talked about, doing them in a way that maybe we can agree with. The problem is they are still stopped in their thought process on tolls, and we do not feel that that's anything we can ever support.
Did the governor begin the meeting by making clear that the framework to go forward for his administration was truck tolls and the discussion?
Well, I asked in the beginning, and it was brought up several times throughout the conversation, is your thought process about funding transportation going to always include tolls? Whether it's car tolls, truck tolls, no matter how many gantries there are, will it include tolls in some way, shape, or form? And they said yes. That is they're part of their thought process. And we expressed our caucus's opinions on that, and as you know, that's not something that our caucuses have an appetite for, that we don't support. But so we continue to talk about the plans, our alternatives in the House Republicans, the Senate Republican plan, and other ideas that the rest of them had. And I think the shame of it is, I think we can agree to a lot of things, as long as tolls are not the basis for the transportation funding.
Or any other net new revenue?
Correct.
Okay.
Some of us are facing a very tight deadline. I wonder if we could move on to the governor.
Sure. So get
Is that
out
the
your
hook?
ink.
I'd like to
Go ahead,
I'd like to
Paul.
ask
Yep.
if the House Republicans are going to be putting out a plan, because we were told that you were, and some of your comments, perhaps today I'm hearing them, sounds like you might not, that you presented them in this format. So I'm just
No,
wondering.
I gave the governor some of our alternatives we've talked about. As you saw, the Senate Republicans, put out their plan, and the House Democrats just said they wanted to toll trucks, and we have solutions and alternatives that we feel people should be looking at. So those are our alternatives to transportation. We'll be putting them out in a press release sometime soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for understanding.
Thanks for the hook.
Yep.
Thank you.
Go ahead to table.
We got the governor with the jams on the
I just got here and I'm already breaking things. I'm missing football practice right now.
You are? You got Maxter on the program. That's all right.
Max Reese is running it now?
No,
Max
Maxi Lorenzo.
can go anywhere.
No, Max can run the press. I don't know about football.
True.
The governor in this group?
Hey, Max,
We heard you last.
get the governor with them?
He'll do his own. I
So-
think he wants to do his own, so.
Do you want me to start, Marty? You want to start?
Yeah, why don't you start, Joe?
All right.
Who's the governor now?
Oh.
There you go.
All right, I'll kick things off, but I've got a pretty good team with me here. We laid out a plan that gets our special transportation fund fixed, takes care of our roads and bridges in a real way, without raiding the rainy day fund, without piling on $700 million a year in debt on the backs of the Connecticut taxpayers. We sat down, legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle, and said, we like this plan. This plan works and the numbers add up. And if you want to reach a compromise, we're ready to talk. But otherwise, we're ready to get this passed. There was talk about hiring a consultant and see if we could bring down overall costs over a period of time. There was talk about long-term structural deficits. I said, I'm here to solve problems, not to study problems. We have a problem that we inherited, a special transportation fund that's going underwater. We've been noticed that we have bridges that not in a state of good repair, and we have to fix it. We have a credible plan to fix it that doesn't raid the rainy day fund, and I think that's what we should start with. They're going to go back and,
Talking about?
pardon?
Which plan are you talking about?
Well, the one
His
plan,
or your plan?
It's our plan.
Yeah, but which one is it? Is it trucks only, or is
Yeah.
it?
I said, let's start with trucks only. You don't want cars and trucks. I salute the Democrats from the House. They've come forward with a plan. It raises us over $280 million. This is real money that we can do. We can adjust those prices depending on where you want us to be. We can complement that money with some different ways, but let's get this thing started in an honest and comprehensive way.
Governor,
Does
just
it take money
Can-
from
be-
Let
before
Joe
we-
say a few things.
Before we do questions, I just want to give my take a little bit. And while I'm not the senior one of the delegation, with Marty being here a little longer, I've been around this for a little while. And our hopes today was coming into the room to have a discussion. Len put forward a plan that relied on the rainy day. And while the governor was reluctant, he wanted to have that conversation of, well, how much of the rainy day? If a recession comes, we always outline the 15%. And that was in the bipartisan budget. That's not a number this governor made up. It's not a number that Marty Looney made up. It's the number that we came to in the bipartisan budget that we thought would give the state of Connecticut and its residents the cushion it needed if a recession was to happen. Len wanted to change that, and we didn't dismiss it out of hand, but we had concerns. So when we came into the room today, we had the discussion of, well, if we can work out compromise in many areas. One of the other areas they said was, well, how do we know you're not going to go to cars after you go to trucks? I said, that's a fair question. What would you like to see? Anything up to a constitutional amendment. You can move forward with that. That's a plan. That's not preying on the residents' fears. That's not saying there's more to come. That's saying we are tolling trucks that do 80% of the damage to our roadways, the majority of which are out of state, and it's going to alleviate a burden that's going to be felt by our middle class otherwise. They like that. Themis raised the concern about the cost of construction. The governor immediately said, I'll absolutely talk about that. Let's have that conversation. What does that look like to you? So they named 4 or 5 issues that they took umbrage with our plan. Every time we all said, well, we'll have that conversation, it came back to, well, if it includes tolls, we don't want to have the conversation. So my question to them is, and I'm sure the governor will answer it, is why are they picking truck drivers over our middle class? Because that's what's going to happen. If we deplete this rainy day, and this is why I said I've been here for a while and I've seen this story go before, when that recession comes, and there's no money left in the savings account, we will cut education. We will cut nonprofits. And the other side of the aisle will say, oh, terrible managers they are. They didn't plan for something like this happening. Well, we did. But we also plan to move our infrastructure in the state of Connecticut forward, and that's why we came out with the truck-only tolling plan. Marty.
Thank you, Joe. I think that the House really has shown us the way by coming out with the truck-only plan, which is, in effect, a return to a version of what the governor had proposed in the election last year, and is, in fact, the only plan that is voter-approved, given the virtue of the fact that he was, in fact, elected, running on that proposal. It is the Republicans are saying that, well, this would be the beginning of, it would be the nose under the camel's nose under the tent, the idea that you would eventually move toward cars anyway. That is certainly not the case. As the Speaker said, we would entertain going as far as a constitutional amendment to prevent passenger car tolls. The focus has to be on those trucks, both in-state and out-of-state. We believe that we'd be on strong footing to have that. It's reasonable. The trucks put a significant burden. The states on either side of us have truck tolls to significant degrees. We would adopt a revenue scheme that would be within that range of national policy regarding tolls on trucks, and it would be a significant component of the revenue stream that we need to enact the CT 2030 plan. Obviously, there's discussion about what the other components of that would be, but we believe that number could approach $180 million or perhaps even more on the truck piece alone. So that's the centerpiece of what we need to do, and it is absolutely essential that we get this done. There is, in fact, there is a real crisis in our state that we cannot just delay any longer in terms of the needed reconstruction of our roads and bridges. We need to get this done now. We don't want the issue to drag on into the 2020 session. We think we have momentum on that issue, and the time to move is now. And we are certainly willing to listen to other Republican proposals. Obviously, their proposal on the rainy day fund we think was entirely too large and really puts us at risk in the next major recession. But again, there is room for talk as long as they're willing to continue to negotiate. We put out, I think, a forthright plan today.
Does this new plan include any use of rainy day funds?
Do we all want to use those?
You can answer that.
You answer that, Bob.
Say it again.
Does the new plan include the use of any rainy day funds?
The conversation's still happening, but we believe that there's a better plan that does not involve using the rainy day fund. I mean, let's just be clear that the door on tolls for cars is closed. Mm-hmm. And so we're talking about trucks only right now. And the fact of the matter is we can talk about a number of different options as to why we can't fix our transportation system, or we can talk about or a number of reasons why not to fix transportation, or we can talk about this issue and how to fix transportation throughout the state of Connecticut. But I think we've come up with a good plan, a good compromise, and I want to thank the governor and certainly Senator Looney and Representative Simowitz, Representative Ritter, and everybody for working so hard on this issue, because it is extremely important that we get this issue done, behind us, and that people of Connecticut have confidence in fixing our transportation infrastructure that has gone on unfinished for too long.
Marty, are you saying that?
Chris, just real quick, because I think the thing I kept hearing in that room was about trust and trust in government. So how is it trusting in government if in 2017 we passed a historic bipartisan agreement with one goal in mind, to give ourselves stability in the long term for the next recession, to send a signal to Wall Street, to send a signal to investment people who buy our bonds every year, that we are going to have a rainy day fund and we're going to restrict ourselves from using it. We're going to have bond covenants in place to do that. Never before in Connecticut. And then when the moment gets tough, when you have to make a tough decision, we do what every generation before us did. We sell the next generation down the road. We deplete that rainy day fund, they get left with $1 billion, and in 5 years, we go, boy, I wish we had not done that. And I would ask anyone in Connecticut who's going to see grandma tomorrow, or grandpa on Friday, or their sister and their brother, in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania, I want you to count the 18-wheelers, and I want your kids to tell me where those license plates comes from in those states. It's going to be Oklahoma, Nevada, everything around the country, and they will pay in every single state. There are bridges that will cross from Connecticut into New York that will pay $94. They pay nothing here. Governor Cuomo jokes in New York that he gets almost 40% of his revenue from Connecticut drivers alone. We are only going after 18-wheel large trucks and light trucks like every other state to invest in our middle class and our infrastructure. That is an honest plan, it will work, and we are not going to burden future generations by sweeping the rainy day fund by $1.5 billion.
As much as we appreciate the preview of the 2020 talking points, could somebody give us an overview of what the hell this thing looks like? The governor said 280 million.
So,
you two said
depends on the rate, Mark.
186. Okay.
So, and we may bounce around a little bit because honestly, we've all had different portions. So what this would do as far as the rainy day fund, I heard that question, it would maintain the 15% as was passed in the bipartisan budget. When additional monies are going in, those would be consistent with the budget also, pay down the liabilities. We would then use the savings from those payments to go into the transportation fund. But it would have to get to the 15%, and then we would start taking
You
off.
set a target, I mean, the governor's plan, the one a few weeks ago, was 320 million in tolling revenue. What is the target for this plan, however you get there?
So it's a little bit short, it's about 280 million. And it would be a combination of the tolling, to the price tag of about 180 million to 200 million. I'm glad you're here. And the additional money we would get by paying down some of the liabilities when we reach the 15%. And then also other cost savings. We would ask DOT or require DOT to have a 10% cost savings on the majority of the projects moving forward. We'd also put into place the Transportation Oversight Board to ensure the costs are comparable with neighboring states. And if we can borrow and use their plans, whether it's rail stations or others, we're saving money there. The state of Connecticut has actually done a great job under this governor's leadership in DOT with the on-site building and the costs that it saves there. Not only does it have minimal impact to the people using the roadways, we save money by building it right next to the current bridge and then swapping it in. So a combination thereof, our plan would reach about 280 million.
When are you and your Senate colleagues going to actually have a plan, run it by your caucuses, and be able to come back and tell the governor that you can pass one? Because, I mean, he seems ready and willing to make a deal here. He needs some partners.
Yeah, no, he is, and I think that's fair. Speaking for the House, I did not want to go to my caucus with yet another plan. I was hopeful that we could compromise with our Republican colleagues, take a lot of things that they wanted to do into consideration and enact them, being trucks only, all the way up to a constitutional amendment. That was suggested by Senator Looney, and I thought that was a great compromise. But they weren't interested if it had anything to do with tolls, and quite honestly, it just doesn't make sense to me.
But you guys, yeah, wait a minute, you guys haven't demonstrated that you can get 76 votes in the House or 18 votes in the Senate to get any tolling plan done. So, again, when will you be able to come back to the governor and tell him, Governor, we can do this?
So
As House and Senate Democrats, we can do this.
I thought I just answered that. I did not want to go to my caucus until such time as that there was a plan. We will be meeting with our caucuses in the coming weeks and days.
Listen, do you want to go through the numbers for 1 second?
Sure,
Just to give,
absolutely. Mr. Speaker was 100% on point. We're looking at a truck-only bridge tolling plan that will generate around $180 million. We are going to preserve the rainy day fund and consistent with current law. When the excess above 15% becomes available, we'll use that to pay down stairs liability and provide additional capacity in the Special Transportation Fund. And lastly, we also modeled out in partnership with our Democratic leaders, stretching the repayment terms to 35 years for the TIFIA and RIF. And so these are the items we discussed today that the leadership will be bringing back, and in due time, we will bring forth those details to the media.
Melissa, can I follow that and ask this to you and to Joe? Because here's the logic problem that I have with your solution. You're saying, listen, guys, we're not touching the rainy day fund until we go over the limit. You guys know, based on the projections, you don't go over the limit till next September 30th. That's when the fiscal year's over and the audit's done. What's your contingency plan if you run into recession before then? Either your plan has a huge hole in it, or you've got to have another option. Like
It's a great question, Keith. It's a great question, and that's why that's right. We are in much better position with the additional truck tolling revenues and the more, the retainment terms we're leveraging. At the end of the day, there's a range of what this plan can afford. If the
What
50,
do you do if it's not there?
we will have two plans. We will make sure that we can fund infrastructure within both of those plans. And at the end of the day, we will close the books, certify whether there's a surplus, and a year thereafter would become available to pay down debt.
here's the answer to your question. We got $186 million we're not going to have otherwise, thanks to the truck tolling. If we raise the rate to $10, we'll get well above that.
You've got $100 million roughly of this plan that's tied to paying down the pension. You use the rainy.
No. I think there's a misunderstanding
You
here.
said 180 and then another.
That 180 is
100.
his tolls.
That's
tolls
the
from
trucks,
trucks.
tolls.
That's right.
200.
And then there's the other 100.
No, it has nothing to do with paying down the pension.
Where does the other 100 come from? That gets you to 280.
Great, so $180 million for toll revenue.
100 GO.
We are going to, it was in the original plan, the use of the 100 GO. We're